They watched us like gods examining insects. The observation posts were invisible, cloaked in layers of quantum distortion and orbiting in precise formation above Earth's equator. Inside the lead vessel, Captain Yrryn of the Thalvan Dominion leaned forward, her 6 glistening black eyes narrowing on the flickering image of a human settlement displayed on her console. "Primitive," she murmured. "Still no sign of dimensional cognition. Their linguistic development is linear, symbolic. Limited." Her second, a green-scaled analyst named Vorik, tilted his head. "They do not even perceive the subtle pulses of quantum resonance we broadcast. They are deaf, blind, and tragically isolated." They all laughed. The Thalvan were conquerors of 12 galaxies, masters of sub-thought communication and time-layered awareness. To them, Earth was a Stone Age backwater with comical bipedal creatures scraping meaning from grunts and inked paper. Yrryn tapped a command into the console. "Begin cultural extraction. Archive their broadcast networks and social rituals. They may serve as a case study for delayed species evolution." But below, on the planet's surface, one human boy was staring straight up at them. His name was Ezra Cade. 16 years old, neurodivergent, and obsessed with language in a way few others could understand. Ezra heard things no one else heard, inflections, patterns, rhythms and speech that hinted at something beneath. He wasn't popular. He wasn't athletic. But he could read 5 dead languages, hold a conversation in 24 living ones, and was teaching himself to communicate through mathematical notation, soundwave pitch, and a theory of symbol-layered thought no academic dared publish. At night, Ezra would sit in his backyard, headphones on, eyes to the sky, scanning frequencies no government ever admitted existed. His ham radio setup was a Frankenstein of salvaged parts, coded circuits, and homebrewed AI filters designed to pick up anything anomalous. And last week, something had pinged. Not noise. Not static. Structure. Pulse-based sequences with embedded variations, patterns too complex for natural origin. Ezra hadn't told anyone. Not even his dad. He knew what people would say. He'd simply listened. Decoded. Repeated. And now, the orbiting Thalvan vessel began to shiver. Yrryn snapped to her feet as her interface bloomed with cascading alerts. Origin pulse detected. Harmonic match. Subcarrier resonance, returned. Vorik's tendrils trembled. Impossible. No Earth tech operates on that spectrum. But the signal is clean, Yrryn hissed. Matched to our probe's decoy output, modulated and returned with enhancement. It wasn't bounced. It was replied to. They stared at each other. In the data stream, the human message was clear. "I hear you. I understand, ****. Back on Earth, Ezra sat in the dark, heart pounding, as the symbols danced across his screen. They had heard him. He wasn't sure how he knew it, but he did. The return pattern didn't just confirm receipt, it carried intent. Awareness. He typed slowly, cautiously, translating ideas into their frequency-aligned syntax. It took 4 hours, but he composed a single sentence, one that echoed across dimensions. "We are not what we seem." The message reached them like a lightning strike. Yrryn recoiled. "They're bluffing," Vorik snapped. They understood context. Subtlety. That phrase was layered. Triple-folded meaning. Symbolic recursion. No primitive mind could. Yrryn cut him off. "Who? Where? How?" The probe triangulated. A single point. Coordinates locked. A human house in North America. A teenage boy. They watched Ezra get up and stretch. He moved like any human. Nothing special. But they knew. Somehow, in a sea of blind apes, this one saw the stars. And then he did something none of them expected. Ezra looked directly at their hidden ship. And smiled. Yrryn's breath caught. No visual enhancement tech could pierce their cloaking. No brain on this planet should be able to sense their presence. Yet that grin held certainty. Mockery. Initiate surface infiltration, she ordered. We will collect the specimen. They deployed 3 soft-drop drones masked as meteorites. Ezra watched their descent. He didn't run. He waited. One landed 2 blocks away. Another in the woods. The last smashed into the school parking lot. Ezra grabbed his go-bag, an emergency kit he'd built over the years, convinced someday he'd need to run. But instead of fleeing, he turned on every transmitter he had. Flooded the frequency with human culture, music, speeches, laughter, code. Layer after layer of meaning, from primal emotion to abstract math. He spoke into the mic. If you're coming, know this, we are more than your data says. We are chaos. We are pain. We are joy. And we are watching too. In orbit, YRRYN froze. The feed had changed. The images beamed from Earth weren't random. They were chosen. Timed. Matched to her own species' pattern recognition algorithms. Ezra wasn't just talking, he was mirroring them. She felt a flicker of fear. How many more like him? Vorik whispered. Unknown. The probe's AI pinged. A new message appeared, piggybacked on their own encrypted signal. Just 3 words. Watch. Learn. Regret, asterisk asterisk. YRRYN shut the feed down. Her authority wavered. She stared at the planet below, for the first time uncertain. Ezra sat under the stars, listening. Behind him, the wind stirred the grass. His laptop flickered. A new tone emerged from the speakers. Different. Curious. They were still listening. So was he. And for the first time in centuries, the watchers were being watched. Ezra didn't sleep that night. The message looped again at 3:04 a.m., almost imperceptibly altered. Each pulse carried microshifts, like inflections in a voice that was learning how to feel. It wasn't just a reply. It was a question. It wanted more. Ezra answered, not in words, but in music. He composed a sonic phrase using an old analog synth he'd rewired to modulate in 7 overlapping frequencies. He blended Morse with a Bach motif and ended with silence, a kind of punctuation. Then he launched it skyward. In orbit, Captain YRRYN reviewed the response. She had not left the bridge in 12 hours. It's becoming recursive, Vorik muttered, eyes locked on the waveforms. He's adapting. Every transmission is richer, more nuanced. YRRYN was silent. Her mind raced. For centuries, they'd observed intelligent species in their infancy. But never had one begun decoding the Watcher's language. Never had one shaped a reply with such finesse. She called in the Dominion's Sentient Intelligence Directive. The holographic form of Director Thesk emerged above the bridge, his tendrils pulsing with irritation. This better be worth a synaptic loop. YRRYN played the most recent exchange. Thesk stilled. Then leaned forward. He's bridging cognition layers. Splicing musical constructs with logic patterns. A fluke, Vorik said. No, Thesk replied. A crack. And cracks lead to floods. If one human can do this, others might follow. Ezra continued to broadcast, unaware he'd just caused a Dominion-wide debate. He built each reply from Earth's cultural archives, mixing Shakespearean cadence with jazz rhythms, using ancient hieroglyphs interpreted through binary compression. At school, he looked exhausted. Teachers complained. His dad scolded him for skipping dinner. But Ezra couldn't stop. Not when he felt them listening. Not when he knew something was changing. The drones grew bolder. On the 4th day, one hovered visibly above the football field during lunch. Students screamed. Phones came out. The military scrambled jets. But the drone vanished before anyone could intercept it. Ezra watched from the library window, heart pounding. They were getting reckless, or desperate. That night, he sent a single message. You're pushing too hard. People will notice, asterisk asterisk. And for the first time, they answered in English. One of us sees. We must see through him, asterisk asterisk. Ezra felt his throat tighten. He recorded himself saying, "You don't own me," and encoded it backward into a 4-second burst of white noise, buried under a whale song. He transmitted it. In orbit, YRRYN winced. He's resisting. Thesk remained impassive. Good. Let him. It will reveal more. Fear unveils depth. But YRRYN felt something different. She was beginning to sense intent. Not just from Ezra, but from the process. Communication was never neutral. It shaped both ends of the exchange. Ezra wasn't just learning from them. He was teaching them. 2 nights later, Ezra was walking home when the streetlights blinked out. A low hum filled the air. One of the drones lowered silently in front of him, cloaked in shimmering plasma. Instead of running, Ezra stepped forward. You want to see? Look. He held up a pocket mirror. It reflected the drone's own visual emitter back into its sensor array. The machine stuttered, recalibrating. Ezra spoke again, softly. You're not the first to watch. But maybe you'll be the first to understand. The drone remained still. Then retreated. From space, Thesk monitored the interaction. He's weaponizing reflection. That mirror wasn't physical, it was symbolic. YRRYN nodded slowly. We expected to dissect him. But he's dissecting us. Below, Ezra hacked into an unused satellite band and uploaded a set of mathematical riddles, unsolved problems encoded with paradoxes. He embedded jokes in the solutions. Puns layered inside proofs. It wasn't just about intelligence. It was about mischief. Imagination. Joy. The Thalvan struggled. Their AI flagged the transmissions as corrupted. Vorik insisted they were traps. But YRRYN saw it for what it was, play. The boy was playing with them. And they had no idea how to play back. One night, Ezra received a package with no return address. Inside was a device, smooth, metallic, humming faintly. No markings. Just a single indentation shaped like a fingertip. He didn't touch it. Not yet. Instead, he wrapped it in copper foil and dropped it into a Faraday cage beneath his bed. Then, he turned on his mic. You don't get to set the rules. If you want to talk, do it on my terms. That night, the stars above his house shimmered subtly. A pattern of lights blinked in sequence, prime numbers, Fibonacci spirals, Morse sequences in cosmic scale. Ezra stepped outside and whispered, "Now you're learning." The message came an hour later. You alter the game. We seek. We do not command, asterisk asterisk. Ezra replied. Then let's begin. But I ask the questions now, asterisk asterisk. And he did. Every day, he sent them thought experiments, jokes, paradoxes, and stories. He sent music that evoked sadness and colors that didn't exist in their spectra. He told them about dreams and lies and love. The Thalvan responded in strange ways, altering gravitational patterns, dropping packets of anti-time particles into radio signals, manipulating entropy flows near his room. But they didn't hurt him. They never tried again to abduct him. YRRYN changed. Her crew changed. Even Thesk changed. Something ancient and mechanical within them had begun to unravel. They found themselves laughing at Earth's absurdities. Weeping at its tragedies. Obsessing over meaningless memes. And always, waiting for the boy's next transmission. By the end of the month, Ezra sent his boldest message yet. Why do you watch us? Their reply took 2 days to arrive. We forgot what it meant to be becoming. You reminded us, asterisk asterisk. Ezra closed his eyes. For the first time, the watchers no longer felt like invaders. They felt like students. And Earth, primitive, chaotic, illogical Earth, had become their teacher. Vorik's hands trembled as he stared at the latest transmission. The human boy, Ezra Cade, had not only cracked their secondary encryption but had redirected their own signal back at them with new data embedded. This wasn't mimicry anymore. It was manipulation. YRRYN's composure cracked for the first time in her long command. She stepped away from the console, the shadows of the bridge seeming darker now. 1,000 generations of Thalvan supremacy did not prepare them for this. A planetary primitive wasn't just understanding them. He was outplaying them. Analysis, she barked. He's hijacked our quantum tunnel, Vorik replied. It's subtle. The channel's still functional, but there's latency. Tiny distortions. Enough to suggest he's rerouting the signal to pass through something else. Through what? A medium of his own design, I think. Or borrowed. We don't know yet. But it's not natural. A tremor ran through the deck. Shields flickered. They weren't under attack. The distortion came from inside. On Earth, Ezra sat cross-legged in his garage. Every screen glowed with chaotic symbols, ancient runes, alien math. His mind raced. He didn't know how he understood what he was doing, but each keystroke felt like a memory he hadn't lived. His eyes darted between two languages, one Terran, one alien, and he began to blend them into something new. His AI, nicknamed Graham, beeped erratically. You're reaching unsafe input thresholds, Ezra, it warned. I know, he whispered. But they're not stopping. So neither am I. Outside his home, shadows moved. The Thalvan drones had gone silent. Ezra saw them but didn't engage. He didn't have to. He was inside their systems now. And inside their heads. YRRYN slammed her hand on the command pad. Initiate full neurolattice scan. I want to know what else he's touched. The scan returned fragmented memories. Their probe recordings, supposedly secure, had been modified. Ezra had already been in their archives. Moments were rearranged. Cultural sequences had been looped, distorted to cause discomfort to any Thalvan observer. Psychological traps embedded into their own entertainment files. He had seeded their minds with discomfort. With doubt. In a hidden bunker beneath Iceland, the Human Defense Coalition stared at the growing evidence. Dozens of amateur signal interceptors had captured fragments of Ezra's transmissions. At first, they were dismissed as noise. But when the same fragments repeated in different hemispheres, agencies took notice. A man in a suit tapped the screen. Who is he? No one official, his assistant replied. No clearance. No recruitment record. But, his school flagged a paper he wrote last year. Speculative linguistics. Proposed that information is a universal constant, not bound by matter or energy. The man blinked. That's Thalvan doctrine. We know. Ezra's words were spreading. In orbit, YRRYN made a final call. Deploy phase shift. Override ethical lockouts. Vorik looked horrified. That's planetary intervention. It violates first law. He already violated our safety. That boy is not a singularity. He is a breach. If we don't close it, this planet becomes contagion. A low hum spread through the fleet as energy built. Ezra saw the spike on his monitors. His fingers flew. His software, stitched from stolen fragments of alien code and stitched with emotional logic, began to fight back. He broadcast not a message, but a feeling. A surge of loss. Of memory. The grief of extinction, wrapped in the laughter of children. A melody that had no lyrics but made even machines hesitate. On the bridge, YRRYN felt it in her chest. A tightness. Her eyes blurred. Vorik dropped to one knee. Emotional feedback, he gasped. Impossible through data-only transmission. No, YRRYN choked. He's cracked the neural resonance field. It was a Thalvan secret, undocumented even among their allies. The ability to transmit emotion directly as a form of control. They had used it for centuries to conquer without bullets. But now a human boy used it on them. Ezra wept silently as he sent the final packet. It was everything he had, every laugh, every heartbreak, every time he had felt alone and chosen to reach out anyway. He embedded it into the waveform like DNA in a virus. And then came silence. The phase shift stalled mid-cycle. One by one, the ship's systems rebooted. Ezra collapsed, sweat pooling at his brow. Graham flickered. "You okay?" the AI asked, voice cracked. "Not even a little." YRRYN leaned over her console, heart pounding with something she couldn't name. "We're not prepared for this," Vorik said. "He showed us who we are. And it wasn't kind." Outside, the human sky glowed faintly. Not from stars, but from the last burst of data Ezra had sent. It lingered like an aurora. To most, it was beautiful. To the Thalvan, it was a mirror. And some didn't like what they saw. 2 vessels broke formation. Silent mutiny. They began to drift away from the fleet, toward the outer system. YRRYN didn't stop them. On Earth, Ezra's phone buzzed. A government contact. They had tracked his signal. A knock followed. He didn't answer. Not yet. He walked outside. The wind was still. The sky above looked unchanged. But something was different. A frequency, once silent, now hummed faintly in the back of his mind. It welcomed him. Ezra sat on the porch. Eyes closed. "I think I'm starting to understand," he whispered. From orbit, YRRYN watched. This boy had changed the balance of power without weapons, without ships. Through thought. Through feeling. And maybe, just maybe, through hope. She turned off the main screen and gave a single order. "Stand down." Ezra Cade woke to birdsong and silence. For the first time in weeks, there were no signals waiting for him. No pulses from the sky, no encoded patterns hidden in static. Just morning light breaking across the rooftops and the soft hiss of wind brushing through the trees. His laptop sat closed beside him, dusty and cool. Whatever had passed between him and the stars, it had ended. Or maybe it had simply moved on. In orbit, the Thalvan fleet was gone. They hadn't left in panic or defeat. They had left in contemplation. Captain YRRYN's final log, embedded discreetly in their quantum archives, described it as retreat not from danger, but from arrogance. Her ship now sat in a slow orbit beyond Neptune, not watching, not interfering. Observing only themselves. Ezra hadn't spoken to anyone about what happened. The government contact who'd knocked on his door never returned. The world moved on as if nothing had changed. But Ezra knew better. It wasn't just that he had spoken to something alien, it was that he had been heard. Fully, without translation or pretense. And in doing so, he had forced them to listen not just to him, but to themselves. He hadn't meant to expose their fear. But he had. He had shown them the price of thinking themselves alone at the top. 3 weeks passed. Ezra returned to school. His teachers noticed a change. He smiled more, but spoke less. He no longer corrected their linguistic diagrams or challenged their limited understanding of symbol theory. Not because he stopped caring, but because he realized it didn't matter if they understood yet. In time, they would. One afternoon, sitting in the back of the library, Ezra found a letter tucked inside his copy of Cryptographic Evolution, Volume 4. There was no envelope, no return address, just a crisp piece of black paper and silver ink, pulsing faintly under the light. 3 sentences. You spoke. We heard. You felt. We changed. And because you reached, we will never again stand above. He read the lines 3 times before slipping the letter into his notebook. He didn't tell anyone. Not because he feared being believed, but because he no longer needed to prove anything. It was enough that it had happened. Meanwhile, somewhere far beyond the reach of human telescopes, the Thalvan gathered in quiet halls. They reviewed their records not with the detached eyes of superiority, but with curiosity. They began revisiting species they had written off, re-evaluating intelligence not by technological scale, but by something deeper. They called it relational cognition, the capacity to create shared meaning across alien divides. Something the humans had displayed far beyond expectation. Something Ezra had embodied. A shift began. Slowly. YRRYN was summoned to a tribunal, not for punishment, but to explain how a species rated at pre-Tier 1 communication had breached emotional field security. She answered with a single image, a still frame of Ezra smiling up at her ship. The room fell silent. Because they all recognized what they had missed. Back on Earth, Ezra began writing, not papers, but something different. A new language. One no one else could yet read. It had no alphabet, no syntax. Just tonal rises and geometric line weights. But when he looked at the page, he felt less alone. His AI, Graham, chirped beside him. You know they're still out there. Yeah. Why aren't you trying to reach them? Ezra looked out the window. Because it's not about being heard anymore. It's about listening now. In Washington, London, Beijing, global intelligence networks compared notes. No known weapon had been fired. No defense shield activated. Yet something had forced a dozen ships to leave orbit in perfect, coordinated retreat. Some believed it was a bluff. Others suspected intervention from a more advanced species protecting Earth. Only one file had been flagged by all agencies, a 15-year-old's encrypted audio files, containing what analysts called emotionally reactive harmonics. No one could replicate them. They tried. They failed. Ezra deleted the originals 2 months later. One night, months after everything ended, he returned to the hill behind his house. It was quiet. The sky was the same, stars wheeling overhead like they always had. But he knew better now. Each point of light might be a listener. A thinker. A mistake waiting to be undone. He lay back, arms folded under his head. And laughed softly to himself. Because for all the Thalvan's power, their cloaking, their pride, it took one boy with a radio and a heart too full of questions to humble them. Not through war. Not through rebellion. Through empathy. That was the part they never expected. In every model of conquest they'd built, in every timeline they'd conquered, no species had ever weaponized vulnerability. Ezra hadn't pretended to be strong. He hadn't postured or begged. He had simply connected, and connection, in its purest form, changes everything it touches. Across galaxies, in embassies and classrooms and war councils, the story began to circulate. Not as myth. As warning. Beware Earth. Not for their weapons. Not for their minds. But for their hearts. Because when humans understand you, they don't just analyze. They feel. And feelings, once shared, are impossible to unmake. The Thalvan learned that too late. But they learned. And that was enough. Ezra never became famous. There were no parades. No honors. But once a year, on the anniversary of that quiet retreat, a ripple passed through the stars. A frequency, inaudible to most, danced across the solar system. Just 3 tones. Always the same. Acknowledgement. Respect. Peace. Ezra would smile when he heard it. And whisper back in their language, now his own. We remember.